This week our theme is being open to the Spirit. And so each day we'll be looking at a different passage from the New Testament and what it teaches us about the Holy Spirit, which again is very significant as the third member of what Christians call the Trinity. And the promise of the Holy Spirit in John's Gospel is really spoken about first in John chapter 14. And I'd encourage you to look in your own Bible and to read John 14, verses 15 to 27. Our verse for the day is verse 16, where Jesus says, "And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever." Another advocate to be with you forever. Another helper, if you will. Advocate is an interesting term, and towards the end of the passage I encourage you to read in verse 26. It says, "But the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have said to you." The Holy Spirit, as we read about the Holy Spirit in the entire Bible and in the New Testament in particular, fulfills many different roles or functions or purposes. And the first I want to focus on today is that the Holy Spirit is an advocate who is with us forever. The Holy Spirit, once we become a Christian, is with us from then on until we die. And one role that immediately is highlighted by Jesus here in John chapter 14 is that the Holy Spirit will teach us everything, anything we need to know, and remind you of all that I have said to you. So one of the roles of the Holy Spirit, if you will, is to help us recall and call to mind what Jesus said and taught. Remember, Jesus is speaking these words as part of what's called his farewell discourse in the Gospel of John. In John's Gospel, these chapters from chapter 13 onward are all in the last days and moments of Jesus' life. And so he's trying to assure his disciples that while he's returning to the Father, in going to the Father, he is not leaving them as orphans. He's not leaving them alone. But he is going to send this advocate who's going to stay with them, who's going to remind them of everything that he taught. And he's also saying this in the context of, and your task as one of Jesus' disciples is to keep his words. It's to do what Jesus had taught and shared the disciples that they were to do while he was with them and teaching them. And like any students, so often students are thinking, is this going to be on a test? Do I have to remember this? Am I going to have to share this back with someone else? And one of the roles of the Holy Spirit, it's kind of like if you have a final exam and you get to bring notes or you get to bring help. I love the story about a philosophy teacher at a university in Texas who, for the Introduction to Philosophy final, had told the students they could bring in whatever notes they could fit on one piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. And so for the exam, students came in with things written in size 8 font with no margins, cramming as much as they could possibly fit on the piece of paper, except for one student. One student came in and took a blank piece of 8.5 by 11 paper and put it on the floor next to his desk in the back corner of the hall, and then had a senior philosophy major come and stand on that piece of paper and ask that senior philosophy major the answers to all the questions on the Intro to Philosophy final, and he got an A. Well, the Holy Spirit is kind of like that. We sometimes think by our own effort we've got to remember all this stuff about Jesus and how we're supposed to live and what Jesus said. And what Jesus says is, I'm going to send you an advocate, a helper, who will help you remember everything that I've shared and taught with you. And that's the Holy Spirit.